I want to play game show speed round. You want to go to Congress? Okay, Congressman Castro, let's talk about the issues that you would confront if you were in Congress right now. And I want to hold you to this. I want you to tell us what you think, because people are voting for you to go and represent your district in Congress on issues that are now in the purview of the federal government. So let's go through this. But let me begin by asking something that's less of an issue than a question that you're going to have to confront. If President Obama, who is not enormously popular around the country and is not enormously popular, especially in Texas, offers to come and campaign for you in your district, will you campaign with the president?
Oh, absolutely.
No hesitation?
No. First, I think that the president will win re-election. I do think that Texas Democrats are on their way back. We were on our way back in the House of Representatives. You remember I came in 2003 when we had 62. We got up to 74, one shy of taking back the majority, and then got hit by the wave in 2010. But I think we're working our way back.
So you feel good about the president? You're supportive, 100%, no hesitation?
I am.
No reservation? Okay. I do. Should we be taxing millionaires, as the president has suggested?
I would scale back the Bush tax cuts.
So you would allow the Bush tax cuts to expire, but I think what the president is asking for is not simply a scaling back of the Bush tax cuts, but he is talking about actively attempting to tax the wealthiest Americans, the ones who benefited most from prosperity over the last number of years, actually taxing at a certain income level. There's disagreement about which level. So you would institute a new tax on millionaires, not simply let the Bush tax cuts expire.
Well, and without seeing the specifics, obviously, I would say that I'm inclined to strongly.
You sound like a congressman already. But you are inclined to tax millionaires.
Well, and Evan, and I want to point something out real quick. You know, there's this idea that there's an idea coming from Tea Party folks in particular that people never want to pay taxes. And for the most part, I think, generally, look, we don't, right? But when the country is at a point where it's suffering, which I think we can agree it's been for a few years, I do believe that there are people across the economic spectrum who are willing to step up and help. So I don't believe that everybody that's got over $2 million or $5 million just wants to shut the nation out and say, I'm not willing to sacrifice a little bit more. I do believe that people are willing to sacrifice a little bit more if they have the means and if they feel that the government is on the right track.
All right. Withdraw our troops from Afghanistan and end our involvement over there, yes or no?
Yes.
You'd say you'd have no hesitation. Would you do it in a staggered way? Would you just say bring them all home and let's move on to other things?
I would support the president, his actions now.
The president's plan in Afghanistan. Okay. Means testing for Social Security and Medicaid. Big discussion about entitlement reform as part of the budget conversations in Washington. What about that?
I'm open to it, but I will say this. I don't think that you pull the rug out from under people who are, like my mom, 64 years old, about to retire in less than a year, and change the rules of the game on them right now. I do think that we obviously have some challenges with our entitlement programs. If you just look at the numbers, the generational numbers of how many people are aging out, so to speak, into those programs, it's staggering. So we're going to have to do something, but I think that you stagger your reform. You don't do it all at once.
The big discussion over the years has been that discussing the eligibility age of Social Security being raised, that's the third rail of politics. You can't possibly talk about that. Would you go there? Would you see about raising the eligibility age?
You're right. That is a tough question. I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to consider it, it's got to be with many years advance notice. I don't think that you could do it any time. In other words, you can't tell a 60-year-old, now you're going to work till you're 69. I just don't think that's fair.
But at some point, you're going to have to draw that line. So what's okay? Is 55 okay, but 60's not? Is 50 okay, but 60's not?
Probably about a 15-year window.
You would?
I would say.
Okay. There's been a lot of discussion in Texas. You were involved in some of it here and at the federal level about defunding Planned Parenthood and defunding family planning. Where do you come down on that? I guess you probably have some experience from here.
Oh, sure. No, I've been very supportive of Planned Parenthood and their efforts. I carried some of their major legislation in 2007, 2009. So I think it's a mistake for them to be defunded, especially in a state like Texas where we have one of the highest rates of teen pregnancy and repeat teen pregnancy. I just think that's a mistake.
But this is also a state in which there are a number of folks who are pro-life, and they've got a point of view about this. I know you'd like them to respect your point of view. I suspect you respect their point of view, even if you don't agree with it. And You represent many constituents in your current legislative district and would in your congressional district who are Hispanic Catholics, who may be small s socially conservative. Many of them may be pro-life.
Sure.
Wouldn't they think, no, we shouldn't be supporting through government dollars, even family planning services, for organizations that in places perform abortions?
Well, and I think that's part of the misunderstanding of Planned Parenthood is that abortion services are such a small part of what they provide. It really is a holistic family planning, and that's so necessary in Texas. One thing I could never understand in the legislature, quite frankly, as I was carrying my bill to reform sex ed, was why there wasn't an agreement between conservatives and progressives about trying to make sure that less teen women or teen girls get pregnant, doing everything that you could to reduce that rate. Because the less pregnancies you have, the less decisions are going to be made about keeping or aborting a pregnancy. So that to me seemed to be the common ground that we could find. Unfortunately, we were never able to quite find it. I do think that one day we'll get there.
So so just to sum this up, you would maintain government support family planning services?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Same-sex marriage. There was a whisper campaign during your brief Castro Doggett indulgence there, that you were somehow not supportive of same-sex marriage or not supportive of civil unions, that you had a position on the Defense of Marriage Act that was out of step with much of the Democratic Party. Clarify that for us right now. Where do you come down on this?
Well, where I come down is I've said that I don't think that the government should discriminate among people that want to get married. And I think that...
Does that mean you're for same-sex? I want to ask you to offer your
Sure.
position clearly. Are you for same-sex marriage?
I think that it should be allowed, sure.
Yes, so you're for same-sex marriage. Okay. What about amnesty for undocumented persons in this country? The Tribune has a story this morning about this horrible kid who committed suicide, related to the feelings about the DREAM Act. The Republican presidential primary has been essentially an exercise in people trying to get to the right of one another on immigration. What about that?
Well, I support comprehensive immigration reform. I think that...
You support amnesty?
I think that could be... I think earned citizenship should be part of it, sure.
How would that work?
A few things. I think that first, there's got to be a waiting period. There's got to be some kind of fee that is paid so that folks are essentially integrated into the society formally. And I know that there are different plans out there, but I do think that generally speaking, that's where we ought to go. And Evan, I think that the fundamental problem that we have with immigration and all of the tension is that we have a nation that right now is really reckoning with itself and unable to accept the fact that there are 4 or 5 major industries that rely on undocumented labor to survive. The best example of that is probably the agricultural industry, that by its own numbers self-reports that 50% of its workers are undocumented, which probably means that 75% of its workers are undocumented.
Right.
And so that gives you a sense, it's not just agriculture, it's hospitality, it's construction.
The building industry. Right?
That's right. But I feel like the nation is not fully able to accept that as a fact and deal with it reasonably.
But you understand, you're applying one set of standards or metrics to this discussion. What people will say is really what you're doing is saying to people who came here illegally, even though you're here illegally, we acknowledge it, you acknowledge it, we're going to let you ahead in the line of people who have been following procedure. If we allow you to stay, even if we allow you to pay a fine, even if we allow you to do whatever, basically what we're doing is forgiving the fact that you've been here legally and that you cut in line ahead of a whole bunch of people who are waiting to get in this country legally.
No, there's no question.
That is the Republican position in a lot of these debates so far. That has been distilled the argument.
And there's no question that there is some merit to their argument. It's not a complete black-white issue where they're completely wrong and we're completely right or vice versa. There's a lot of merit to the arguments they make. But after those tough arguments on both sides are made, you've got to make a decision about what's best for the nation. And I believe that what's best for the nation is that we deal with the fact that folks are here. We've got 12 to 15 million undocumented folks, that they are, for the most part, very productive in our society, and in fact are the economic engines behind several industries. And to accept that fact is a very difficult thing, I think, and certainly we don't relish it, but for the betterment of the country, for the best interest of the country, I think that you've got to be able to accept it. and do its best.
Let me dip back into the presidents for a second and ask you about the president. The president said when he was elected to office, I want to take on comprehensive immigration reform as part of my administration. And a lot of Hispanics in this country, people who supported the president the last time around, are disappointed that immigration has not been more of an issue in the first term. Do you feel that the president has led on immigration? And do you believe that Hispanics generally will support the president in this election?
I do believe that Hispanics will support the president. I don't see a leading Republican that is more appealing to Hispanics, particularly in the Republican debates, as the field necessarily as competition tends to drive you more to one end.
Yeah.
I don't see a more appealing candidate for Hispanics. On the issue of immigration, I think that the president has generally been good. I do feel that perhaps there could have been more attention focused in his first term on immigration. Right. Sure, I agree with that. But there was a serious run made at the DREAM Act. It failed by about 5 votes. And look, that has never happened before. That vote has never been taken before in that way, where it was in both chambers. Yeah. So there is some celebration.
You consider
to be had
that
there.
Progress?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about the EPA versus the states, and particularly Texas. You know there's a big issue in this state with EPA mandates, and we have I don't know how many lawsuits against the EPA actively filed right now. Do you believe the EPA is overreaching with regard to permitting and pollution controls and all that? Or would you be on the side of the states in its actions against the EPA?
Well, I think what you have right now is Texas is having to deal with the fact that for years now, for decades, it's had one of the worst pollution records in the nation. And so what I suspect is that you've got a federal EPA that, when they consider Texas and everything that's going on, they're very unlikely to want to loosen the fold, so to speak, on the state. Yeah. I think they're being very diligent. I know that there are Texas companies that have taken issue with that. And look,
and the governor and the attorney general think that it's all political. They all think that this is the Obama administration hating on Texas. Yeah,
I don't think that it's just political. I think that it's a legitimate regulatory issue.
So you're on the side of the EPA in this?
Sure. Well, I certainly don't think that it's just politics.
Okay. Sure. Obamacare. Just even using the phrase is loaded. The Affordable Care Act. Let's call it by its proper name. Would you be a vote for repeal? Would you be a vote for revision? Or would you be a vote to stay the course as Congress voted on?
I would be a vote. First of all, I support it. If there are revisions that are going to be proposed, of course, I would take a serious look at them.
Right.
But without specifics, obviously, I don't know whether I would support any of them.
But generally speaking, you are for it.
Oh, yeah. I supported it when it was passed.
You are for it, okay. What about investment in green jobs? The Solandra issue has sucked a lot of the air out of the room, but generally speaking, the Obama administration has been on the side of providing resources to companies that it believes would create, in turn, so-called green jobs, 21st century kind of jobs. Whether or not the numbers have actually been there, it's more of a philosophical notion than a practical one at the moment. Yeah. For or against?
I think we should continue with green jobs.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, Solandra has been a kind of a public relations and a real disaster. But
would you support a congressional investigation into what happened there? There's been calls for that. Many of what would be your future Republican colleagues in Congress from Texas have called for an investigation into that.
I don't know enough about the specifics of that case, but it does look.
Well, enough to say it's a disaster.
Right. Yeah. Look, anytime you spend $500 million or whatever the exact amount was, and something goes wrong like that, yes, it should be looked into.